Greetings, I am Tom Earl. On this week's episode, I interview Sumiyah, licensed clinical social worker and group fitness instructor. Check it out. Greetings, Tom Earl here. Just before we jump into this episode, I myself and our guest coming up here, Sumiyah, we just wanted to let you know that Sumiyah is a licensed clinical social worker. And so we talk a lot about the work she's been doing over these past years in youth development and youth justice. And so at some point we do talk about sensitive things. And so we just want to let you know that as you're going into this. But at the same time, want to let you know that this is a super valuable resource. Such an amazing interview that I literally had to practice self-discipline or we'd be here for the next 3 hours. Anything you want to add?
Therapy's a good thing. If anything comes up for you from this interview, don't be afraid to seek help.
Yes, indeed. All right, we're going to get out of the way. Here we go. Greetings. I am Tom Earl. Welcome to the celebration. As you know, this is my year of grace. We know you could be anywhere, so the fact that you are here today, sharing your greatest gifts, your time and energy means the world to me. I am not alone. I have an amazing guest. She goes by the name of Sumiyah Mshaka. How you doing today?
Hi, good, Tom. How are you?
Good. High five.
High five.
Yes. Awesome. Do you mind, since I know who you are and how amazing you are, can I let the folks know as well?
Sure.
Okay, here we go. Bio time, folks. I'm going to read it because I do not want to get this wrong. Sumiyah Mshaka is a licensed clinical social worker and group fitness instructor, two of the most amazing things at one time. She comes from a family with a legacy of social justice. Both her dearly departed mother and maternal aunt were licensed clinical social workers. After graduating from UCLA MSW program in June 2004, Sumiyah began her extensive career in social justice advocacy, youth development, and mental health treatment of adolescents in foster care and juvenile justice. This has included serving as a children's social worker, a deputy probation officer too, treatment and counselor, and 8 years as a how do you say this one? Psychiatric social worker, most recently in a mezzo social work position in the new DMH Division, Continuum of Care Reform, Interagency Placement Committee, also known as
IPC.
You go. IPC program. Sumiyah is active in her community by serving on the Governance Board of the Council on American-Islamic Relations, also known as CAIR-LA, and volunteering with AIDSWalk, Islah L.A., and Islamic Relief's disaster response team. For the past 5.5 years, she has taught group fitness, including cardio kickboxing and weightlifting classes at 24-Hour Fitness 4 to 6 times a week, and sometimes even 1,000,000 times a week. That was awesome.
Sometimes it feels like that.
You know, a bio can only capture so much, especially when I edit it down. Take us any part of the journey you want. How did you begin walking this journey that you do?
Well, I think the social work journey and the fitness journey are two very separate things that share commonality as to why I do it is helping people. And it makes me feel good to do those things as I help people. Social work. So when I was in undergrad, I was a pre-med major.
Okay.
And I was pre-med because I was good at biology. And I was like, I want to help people. So sure, I'll be a doctor, right? That makes sense. It made sense to 17-year-old Sumiyah. So, chemistry was really difficult for me, college level chemistry. And I was horrible at math. Math is the only class I've ever flunked in my entire life. And I flunked it twice in college. And so my mom was my best friend. And I said, hey, Mom, you help people. How did you get to do what you do? And she was like, oh, no, you don't want to do what I do. You want to be a botanist, because I've always been into plants. And I'm like, no, I really don't want to look at plants all day. I want to help people. And she was like, well, I have a bachelor's in sociology. So I said, and I went to the department that had sociology and psychology, and I looked at the list, the course list for both majors. And sociology seemed to kind of gel with me more. So I took an introductory psychology class and an introductory sociology class, and everything was just clicking. Mm-hmm. Everything just made sense. Yeah, like, this is how I think, And so that's what started me on the path to social work. And, with my mom as an example and a mentor, I knew that I wanted to just go straight through to graduate school. I didn't want to take any time off. Part of it is I didn't want to make less money. But I also didn't want to get stuck because I knew I wanted to be a therapist eventually. And the only way to do that was with a master's degree. I just went, and I didn't have any kids and I wasn't married, so I just went straight on through. And my mom had gone to UCLA. And so when that was my first acceptance letter, I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure this is where I'm going. I mean, I got accepted to 5 or 6 other schools, but I got 2 scholarships at UCLA too, so that really sealed the deal. Yeah, and I mean, social work school, it's like, I tell people that I mentor, I say, if you get your MSW the same person you were 2 years before you started that program, you didn't do it right. Like, you really learn so much about yourself, and you really change as a result of going through a graduate level social work education. And I've always stuck with kids. I did work with elderly at the very beginning of my career for a couple months. But kids are just really where I felt that I say I fell in love with kids. And I sometimes hesitate to say that because I don't want people to misunderstand that it's like a sexual love or anything like that. It's a different kind of love for the population that I work with.
Well, I think any of us who do youth development know exactly what you mean.
Okay.
So for sure, what to you is a social worker? Because I think we, especially the TV always shows the social workers when I'm gonna take your kids away, and they're always kind of like this mean villain. There's a couple shows I know my mom loves. Chicago MD, because they have a really cool
social worker.
Yeah, and psychiatrist, super awesome character. But in general, people I don't think understand the diversity of what a social worker is. So for you, what is social worker? What's a social worker?
So I think part of what makes social work different than other helping professions is our perspective of the person in the environment, and really looking at the different systems that are at work in a person's life. So it's not just, I have a 13-year-old child in front of me. No, I have a 13-year-old child who's Black, who comes from low socioeconomic status, who's being commercially sexually exploited, whose mother and grandmother were sexually exploited or sexually assaulted in their history, who's witnessing domestic violence at home. All of those things impact who this person is and the decisions and the choices that they have, right? And if you don't understand all of those systems at work, you can't really understand how to best help that person reach their potential, for lack of a better word.
So I know social workers, you can do anything with your MSW.
Right.
So how did you decide to go the clinical route?
Well, my mom was a clinical social worker, so she was a therapist. That's really what clinical social work means. And I don't know, it's just really interesting to me. I fell in love with that aspect in undergrad in my psychopathology class. Just all the different mental disorders and personality disorders. It was just really fascinating to me. And there's still things that I want to do with my MSW. One of my goals for 2019 is to supervise other people who are working on their license while they're getting their supervision hours. I still want to teach. Mm-hmm. I've guest lectured, and some of my friends are social workers who are now professors, and so I've guest lectured in some of their classes. I've done some keynote speaking. I've always been interested in domestic violence and AIDS work. So, maybe 2/3 through my career, but I still feel like there's a lot out there. And in 14 years of being with the County of Los Angeles, I've been in 3 different departments: Children and Family Services, Probation, and Department of Mental Health, all with the exact same degree. So that's the versatility of an MSW right there. Does that answer your question?
It did.
Okay.
What are some, so you want to kind of start to the process of teaching and mentoring? Mm-hmm.
Well, I've been mentoring. I've had several interns over the years. Yeah.
What are some ahas or things you've learned along the way that you didn't know starting, that you have found unique to the knowledge and experience you've had, that you've been sharing in your keynotes and you want to pass on?
I think one thing that I'm always sharing with people who are interested in being social work, especially working with children in juvenile justice or foster care, is how important it is to be self-aware. Because we all have our own things that we're dealing with, and that self-awareness is critical so that when similar things come up with your clients, you're not reacting to your client as if it was happening to you. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
And if you're not aware of your own issues, you can't do that. And then also, genuineness is so important. Like, kids are amazing little genuine detectors. They know if you really care about them or not. And it's not necessarily, I have to work with 6 months for this kid to get that I care about them. It's something that they pick up on really easily, whether you're genuine with them or not. And it's something that they pay attention to, even when you're not directly working with them. Like, I remember a kid, I was working in juvenile hall as a therapist, and the kid had cussed me out. It happens sometimes. It makes me laugh. That's why I'm smiling. Kid had cussed me out for some reason. And, I learned not to take it personal. And the kid overheard me talking to a probation staff about her. And I was saying to the probation staff, yeah, she cussed me out. I guess she's having a bad day today, but I'm not giving up on her. And so the next time I met with that kid, she's like, I decided to work with you because I heard you say you're not giving up on me. And you didn't even know I was listening to that. But that kid needed to hear that. She needed to know that, right? Another child that I worked with off and on for about 2 years, the first 2 months of that, I was doing therapy with her almost every day. And she was really slow to engage, but consistency, genuineness, and boundaries were what opened up that relationship for her. Yeah.
Those last 3 you said, consistency, boundaries, and what was the other one? Genuineness. When did you start to learn that these are 3 core things that can build that relationship? I really think it was when I got out of graduate school and was as they call it, in the trenches. Especially with kids in foster care and juvenile justice, they've been through so much, and often through so many people who say they care, who say they want to help, that they're like, okay, you're here today, but I don't know if you're going to be here next week. And so consistency is coming back and always having that unconditional positive regard for your client. And that's what makes them say, oh, this person is really here for me.
boundaries. Kids need boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't look like I'm physically punishing you when you do something that I don't agree with. That's not what it looks like. It looks like, for me, it looked like being respectful. Mm. And I would say to kids when I first met them, I'm always going to respect you. I'm not going to call you out of your name or put you down or make you feel bad about yourself. And by the same token, I just would appreciate that same respect from you. I'm like, can you do that? And they're like, yeah, I can do that, miss, no problem. And I would say, I'd like to be called Miss Sumiyah because, I'm older than you. And they're like, okay, cool. What would you like to be called? Oh, I want you to call me this. Okay, great. And then sometimes they'd call me just Sumiyah, and I say, who? Oh, Miss Sumiyah, my bad. And again, that's a boundary. I'm the adult, you're the child. I'm the therapist, you're the client. I don't call my doctor by her first name. That same kind of thing. But yeah, I think it was really just being in the trenches, being in the work.
Yes.
Yeah.
So many things that you're bringing up reminds me of the work I've done since 2011. I've been doing youth development, so not as long as you have.
It's because I'm probably older than you.
True. And it took me a little longer to get through school. I meandered and tried a bunch of different degrees. But what I did a lot of times was train people to work with underserved or at risk or, different things like that. Mm-hmm. Mostly teachers. But one thing I found was people really wanted to be young people's friends. I want to be your friend. And there's such a difference between being a friend and a mentor.
Yeah, for sure.
What about how have you found walking that line of building a genuine relationship while at the same time making sure there's like the accountability aspect?
I think it was a lot harder in the beginning. One, because I hadn't been in the practice of social work as long, and I was a lot younger. So when I came out of graduate school, I was 24 years old, and I'm working for the Department of Children and Family Services. Like you said, people who take kids. That was something I had to do sometimes in my position. But I would get a lot of parents asking me if I had kids asking me if I had kids, people asking how old I was. And I still don't ever tell clients my age. But at that time, 24 to a 17-year-old, that's not a big gap.
Yeah.
24 to a 35-year-old parent, that's not a big gap. So I really wanted to just focus on, what else I was bringing to the position other than my age. And in terms of like when I was a therapist, when I would end a relationship, usually because the kid was leaving juvenile hall or the placement where I was working, I would give them my card with my office number on it. And I would say, anytime you want to call me and let me know how you're doing, that's great. I'd love to hear from you. And if you don't want to do that, that's okay too. Like, my feelings won't be hurt. Don't worry about it. I just want you, to do your best out there and know that I'm always praying for you and hoping you're doing well. But I would say to them, Miss Sumiyah is not going to call you after you leave here. And there's some reasons for that. Because one, being in juvenile hall is a traumatic experience in and of itself for a lot of kids. So if you're out there in the world and you're doing fine and, that period in juvenile hall is a blip on your timeline, it's not fair of me a year later to call you up and say, hey, Joe, how are you? Remember I'm your therapist from juvenile hall? And have all those memories come flooding back. And they're like, yeah, that makes sense. I'm like, yeah. And so sometimes kids would call me, I had one kid who would call me like every 6 months. And he'd say, Miss Sumiyah, or that was probation, so I was Miss Mshaka. Miss Mshaka, it's me, Jose. I'm doing okay, and I'm not in jail. And that was pretty much it. And I say, that's awesome. I'm glad you're doing great, Jose. And he'd be like, all right, talk to you later. And he'd call another 6 months and say the same thing. So, but then I had a kid who contacted me 10 years after I had worked with them. Child is 27 now. And I worked with him off and on for about 2 years. And so that was really, really something for me. And I had to ask him. I didn't want to make any assumptions about why he had contacted me. And I said, you know, why? It's been 10 years. Why did you reach out to me? And he said, I just wanted to let you know what a difference you made.
Wow.
In my life. And I was just like, subhanAllah, you know, I was like, that's amazing. That this kid is still remembers the work we did together. 10 years later, he's not a kid anymore. You know, I made an impact in that life. And for that, I'm thankful.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Was it in probation? Was that when you were serving?
Yeah.
And such a tough spot to be impacting a young person's life too.
Yeah, it's a very nuanced position with so much power, right? Same as Children and Family Services, so much power there. And what I learned early on was that my clients knew how much power was in that position, and it was not my job to let them know every 5 minutes. I can violate you. I can send you back to court. You know, it was not my job to do that. It was not my job to say, I can take your kid if you're doing X, Y, and Z. They know that already, you know? So yeah, it was for some kids, it was difficult to navigate. You're my probation officer, but you're my therapist too. And for some kids, it made more sense, and it made it easier for them to engage in treatment.
So many questions come up. Let me jump into this one, and I'll come back to the other one that was in my mind.
And let me know if I'm like rambling, because sometimes I do that. Okay.
And I apologize. I'm going off script because I enjoy this work too. And it's so rare you get to talk to somebody who's gone through it, but also you have so much expertise, both clinical, academic, and actual. You know what I'm saying? So, I remember one of the positions I had. I went from a job that was more like really. I don't want to say touchy-feely because, we weren't interacting in that way, but it's all about emotions. You never give up on anybody. You never kick anyone out of the classroom. To then a position where the young people had to go through like a 3-month orientation. And at any point, if they showed they weren't able to make it through the orientation to the next program, then you would have to kick them out. We called it self-selection. They'd self-select out. But for a lot of young people, if they were to be kicked out or self-selected out, it would violate their probation, and they would have to go back to, most of them were like in their 20s, so they had to go to actual jail. And it was so hard for me to find that, like, actually this person does need to be kicked out or self-selected out.
That balance.
Even though it's going to send them to jail. I remember that stuff used to just tear me up.
I imagine.
So how do you cope with that power, knowing that if accountability looks like this sort of discipline, but it also plays into partially like the prison industrial complex or all these other things that, like as people invested in racial justice that we know is complex, but in this specific instance, this is part of what I feel is my job. How do you deal with that? How do you juggle all that?
I think one thing is for me is that's why it's really key for me to work with kids. Because not only do I feel like they have a lot more opportunities for change, society feels that way about kids as opposed to adults, right? And so as a juvenile probation officer, I can give a kid many chances before I get to that point where I'm violating their probation and sending them to camp. So that was key for me, children versus adults. And then, it sounds, I don't know, touchy-feely or frou-frou or whatever, but just really trying to give 100% every day in the moment with clients. So that when I go home, I'm not waking up in the middle of the night saying, did I do this? I know I did my best, right? And that's something that we learned in graduate school. And then also just a lot of self-care. so that I don't internalize, what's going on with kids. Were there nights when I would wake up, from a kid, or I would dream about a kid, something they told me, some trauma they experienced? Yes. And if I would say to myself, if I'm dreaming about a kid, I need to take better care of myself, because that's a sign. I'm very psychosomatic. That's a sign for me that I'm stressed by this situation. So self-care, it looks like so many different things. And in graduate school, they like beat that into our head. You have to take care of yourself, practice self-care. It's the only way you're going to make it in social work. So for me, it looks like working out, which I thankfully get paid to do. There's an extra bonus, right? So for me, it looks like working out. It looks like having a membership to a spa so that I get a massage at least every other month. It looks like getting my feet done. It looks like listening to myself. Sometimes I might have an event or something that I plan to go to, but myself is saying, you need time by yourself. And being able to say, hey, I have to take care of myself first. As my mom taught me, it's like, no one else is going to do it for you. As an adult, no one else is going to do it for you. And you talked about racial justice. Most of my clients are Black and brown, because they're overrepresented in foster care and in juvenile justice. And with my juvenile justice kids, I would literally have that talk with them, especially the boys. I would say, you're going out there into the world. The system is going to want you to fail. They're going to expect you to fail. So you can't give them a reason to be like, hey, that kid's messing up, right? And it sounds like a lot of pressure, but I think as Black people, it's pressure that we've always been experiencing. It's that you have to work twice as hard for the same result as a person of color or as a woman. Throw that into the mix as well. And so, yeah, I would just have to have that talk with my kids so that they really understood. And I would say, you're 17 now or you're 18 now. The system is going to stop giving you chances. If you get arrested and you go to county jail, there's not going to be a Miss Sumiyah coming to check on you every day. Is there a therapist there? Yes. But you have to be like psychotic in order to get that treatment in county jail. So take advantage of the resources you have now. Take advantage of the people you want to help you now so that you can, leave this part of your life behind. So, kids, they always appreciate honesty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were talking about self-awareness earlier, and a lot of self-awareness around emotional baggage. What about what about self-awareness around the issues we're talking about now? A lot of education in social work is dominated by still white people, mostly white women. And so what self-awareness do you think we as white people, or a man who might be a person of color, anybody who might have an area of privilege, working in social work, what would you like the people you're going to start teaching and stuff like that? What role does self-awareness around identity, social justice, equity and inclusion, what role does that have in social work?
I think that it has to look like the person of privilege educating themselves, especially about privilege, that whole concept, accepting it, and then being able to articulate it, not in a way that comes across as corny or whatever, but to not be afraid to say, hey, wait a second, this is an instance where my privilege is coming up. And I also think it just has to be about not making assumptions. Like, if I see this Black child in front of me, I'm not going to assume that child is from a poor family. I'm not going to assume that this child was not raised by two parents just because of how they look. I'm not going to assume that this child was raised Christian or, whatever. I don't make assumptions. When I sit in front of a kid and I'm doing an assessment, maybe the kid looks just like me. I say, what ethnicity do you identify with? And they're like, Miss, I'm black. And I'm like, well, I have to ask, because they could say, no, I'm Belizean. I don't identify as black. I've had kids say that to me before, so on and so forth. Or kids who are mixed, but nobody knew they were mixed, right? Like I had a kid who was black and Mexican American, but she presented to most people as just Mexican American. No one ever asked to hear about that other side of her heritage. Yeah, and then I would like blow my colleagues' mind. So-and-so is half black, right? They're like, what? And then I would blow the kids' mind because like I had a colleague who was black. She's very light skinned. I mean, probably about your skin tone. Very light skinned, green eyes that look blue sometimes. And so I'd say, oh, did you see Dr. So-and-so earlier this week? And they say, who? And I said, Dr. So-and-so, she's black, light skin, long brown hair. And they'd say, oh, that white lady with... I'm like, no, she's black, sweetheart. And they're like, really? I'm like, black people come in all shades. And it was a mind-blowing moment for a lot of kids, too.
Did you have any moments, and I know this is a vulnerable question to ask, did you have any moments during your work where you had a, like, oh, wow, I need to bring self-awareness, or I made an assumption?
I mean, I'm sure there are. I'm not sure that I can pick one out of my brain, but I think part of social work is being trained to ask questions and not assume. So I really try and pride myself on asking questions and not assuming. For example, I screened a kid today, 14 years old, pregnant. I asked the social worker, what is this child's plan for the baby she's having? I didn't assume she's going to have it. I didn't assume she's going to give it up. By asking questions, that's how we get at figuring out how we can best be of help. But yeah, I can't think of anything. Can't think of anything right offhand.
I know for me.
Well,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. I think it's fair to assume in my line of work that just about every child I've come across has had some kind of trauma. I think that is an assumption I make. And then I'm asking questions to find out what the trauma is. Just from research and 14 years of being in the field, I don't think I've met a child who hasn't experienced some type of trauma in my line of work.
What do you think if our society had a more understanding that a lot of young people and adults who end up in the prison system and etc., that there's often at the underlying root of this, or even in the classroom, that like kids don't act out just because they're bored. Right. That there's usually something there. Right. What do you think an understanding of this at a deep level would bring to the laws we create, the policies, the way we interact with people?
I think it would be a world where children have a better opportunity, or people have a better opportunity to succeed, have a better opportunity to have the resources that they need at their disposal, and to not feel stigmatized by needing those resources, whatever those resources are. And I've seen that type of change happen, especially in the area of commercially sexually exploited children. 10 years ago, that was not something anyone was talking about. Trauma-informed care, 10 years ago, that was not something that was getting nearly as much press, nearly as much education as it is now. 10 years ago, people were calling children child prostitutes. Now people are a lot less likely to do that. Now the sheriff's department does not arrest children for prostituting. LAPD does not arrest children for prostituting because they've been educated by experts in the field. No, these children are not choosing to do X, Y, and Z. They're victims of trauma. They're victims of exploitation. And we've come a long way, in dealing with that specific issue in the last 10 years. We still have a long way to go. And I've also seen changes in the foster care laws, which is part of the work I'm doing now, in the last 14 years. So I feel encouraged that we just have to keep speaking up.
What do you think is one of those next big frontiers in terms of policy that you'd like to see us 5-10 years from now the same way, around the way we treat young people who have been sex trafficked, that we're going to be having this conversation saying, oh, now we've been able to educate judges and police, and what do you think is the next one you'd like to see?
I think the next thing, and it's something that my uncle is working on with his nonprofit, the Burns Institute. I think the next thing is going to be, and we've already made a lot of strides in it in California, is not charging children as adults in crimes. And so we've come a long way. We've had Prop 57, where the DA is not the person who decides if a child is tried as an adult. It's the judge now. But something my uncle is working on now, he was talking about it at Christmas, was that the new law that's coming down is children age 12 and under will not be adjudicated in court. Why is that important? Because a 12-year-old can't speak to their own defense. You know, the way where they're at cognitively, emotionally, they're not able to do that. And so I don't think people were ready to have that conversation. I don't think the courts were ready to have that conversation 15 years ago. But because of our knowledge of trauma and development and how that's come so far, now we're able to have those conversations. And we're seeing changes in even the way that drugs are criminalized, right, as well. So I think things along those lines are what's coming. Yeah. Hopefully. Inshallah. I don't know if you're listening to this or watching this in California, like you said. I think the new law is that nobody younger than 15 and 16, is it 15 or 16 included, can be tried as an adult. Like at all?
That's one of the new laws I thought said.
Okay. I would have to look into that more. My understanding was that they couldn't be charged as an adult through a direct file from the DA.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So through a court process, someone could still end up charging as an adult. Like I have a 17-year-old who's going through that process right now. And what I'd like to see is, the juvenile justice process being streamlined. This kid has been going through the criminal process of them trying to charge him as adult for 2 years now. That's 2 years out of this child's life now that he can't get back.
And for me, I can share this. When I was in my younger days, before I was on the youth development part, I was on the youth criminal part. So to have a court case hanging over you, where you're thinking, like, mine was a felony. So like a felony hanging over me, it is so stressful.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
you always find yourself thinking, I can't make a plan. I don't know if I'll be around.
Absolutely.
And I was facing that like as a 19-year-old. I can't imagine facing it as a 16, 17-year-old.
Yeah, and that's why mental health is in juvenile halls, because without support, what would happen to that kid? Without someone to encourage them, yes, you can graduate from high school. Yes, it is going to matter because you're not going to be here forever. They can't hold you here forever. It's so important for our kids to have hope.
Some people might be thinking that, that's a no-brainer. Kids shouldn't be tried as an adult. But I do remember maybe 10 years ago, I was in Wisconsin, which can be more conservative.
For sure.
And what was happening is a lot of young people that were in gangs, like 10, 11-year-olds, were the ones who were given the guns, and they were said, like,
absolutely.
Kill
Still
these
happens,
people.
Yeah.
Because they can't try you as an adult.
Right.
So there was this, like, huge push to try people as young as that as adults, because that would deter it. And I think there's just such this movement, like this mentality that like if we punish, it'll not only deter, but like they should be punished.
Yeah. And it doesn't match up with what we know about development for children. It just doesn't match up. You know, one of the things I would say all the time in juvenile hall is, what do you think you have in common with all these other kids here? And they're like, I don't know, miss, I'm locked up. And I'm like, you thought you weren't going to get caught. Every kid who's committed a crime has had that thought in their mind. I'm the one person who's not going to get caught doing this. But most people eventually get caught if they're breaking the law. So the same way a kid is thinking, if I do this, I'm not going to get caught. They're not thinking, if I do this, I'm going to jail for life. They can't even imagine that concept, you know. And especially if we're talking about a kid who's coming from, you know, a family where they already have a sense of the foreshortened future. Maybe that kid thinks they're probably going to not make it past 18. So the concept of prison for life, they can't fathom that. And there's so many factors at play as to why a 12-year-old might do what this person says and pick up a gun and use it in a shooting or something. There's so much, it's so much more than I want to kill somebody. That usually is not even part of the equation in that kind of situation.
So you talked about earlier trauma-informed care. Is this what trauma-informed care is? And it's a new word our listeners might have heard. So
trauma-informed care is really looking at a client or a child or an adult through the lens of trauma. And we've expanded the definition of what trauma is. So most people think of trauma as, I was in a war, I witnessed a war, I was abused, I was raped. Yes, those are all traumas. But intergenerational trauma, like I was talking about before, perhaps a kid who's being commercially sexually exploited now, her parent was commercially sexually exploited, her grandmother was raped. So there's an intergenerational history of trauma that's probably unresolved. And the way that person is parenting their children is impacted by the trauma they've gone through. People's choices are impacted by the trauma they've experienced if it's not treated. So when we're looking at a kid in foster care, we're looking at all the different traumas they've experienced and how that's impacted a child, and then how can we help them work through those hurts, those really damages, you know, to the soul. I hate the word damage, but you know, if a person's raped, they're never going to be the same person they were before they were raped. If you see someone die in front of you, someone murdered in front of you, you're never going to forget that. But there are ways of overcoming, there are ways of working through it. There are ways of channeling your feelings, your emotions, your pain, so that you can move beyond. If that makes sense.
Totally does. And I think researchers like Dr. Duncan Andrade, you know, he talks about how PTSD is over, post-traumatic stress. So it's over. You're still reliving it. But what if the trauma I saw was somebody was shot and it's the route I walked to school?
Absolutely.
So every day
you're re-traumatized.
And it's not done. Like somebody can still get shot.
Right.
So it's not even post.
Right.
And I highly recommend people check out his research that even talks about how like your different chemicals in your body, the fight or flight chemicals, if they're continually elevated,
absolutely,
that they readjust to a higher level.
Yeah.
So if you go into fight or flight quicker, it's because your base has actually raised because you've been triggered over and over and over.
Exactly. And so the key then is helping to understand what the triggers are, and then slowly changing our responses to those triggers as people who have been traumatized. But yes, and most of our children, a lot of adults are dealing with multiple traumas. So a kid has been sexually abused, and They grew up not knowing if they were going to eat food that night. And now they're in foster care, so they're separated from their family, who perhaps they abuse them. But guess what? Kids still want their families, whether they abuse them or not. It's how we're built, right? And that was something that I really didn't get until I was right there in social work, and really, like, now I know kids want their families no matter what. And so now I can say to that kid, you know what? It's okay to want your family. It's okay to have this feeling like, I hate what this person did to me, but I still want them to love me. This is the complexity of the human experience, right? To be able to have these emotions, and it's all about being able to manage them in a way that helps you moving forward, keeps you moving forward. Yeah.
Whew. This is such an awesome talk.
I'm glad.
A few questions for you.
Okay.
So I've been asking so many selfish questions because it's just so much fun talking with you. We had started to talk about how, a lot of us come into this work because of potentially maybe something we went through, or for many reasons, a lot of us come to this work with our own stuff. And I used to be a manager of, or like a gatekeeper of people who could come in and work with. I worked at an agency that worked with young people who had experienced trauma, abuse, or neglect. And a lot of people would come in who had experienced trauma or abuse or neglect as a young person and think, me now working with young people who experienced what I did will save me.
It'll fix me.
And so I used to just see them come and be like, nope, you're not coming in. So we're not going to get our like blindside moment where like, oh my God, like you got the one where the kid called you 10 years later, but those are so few and far between.
Absolutely.
So what keeps you in this? What gives you your like reward or your feeling of, because we all need that feeling of accomplishment and fulfillment, so in a profession where our work never feels done and our good days are followed by really low days, and what for you keeps you invested in this work?
I think that 14 years in, I just have so many positive memories, and I have so many, and that's one of the great things about working with kids is I don't know what the word is that I want to use to describe it, but there's just a softness to them, maybe. And so I have, a binder full of pictures that my kids have drawn me, saying, "You're the best therapist ever," or letters that they've written me, or, I still have these memories in my mind, and that keeps me going. And in my current position, I'm not working directly with kids anymore. Now I'm working more administratively with them, but I'm learning to find those moments in different ways. It could be, I remember one teleconference I was facilitating, everybody wanted to talk about how this kid was so physically aggressive, so angry, so destructive, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, well, let's take a look at what this child has been through. This child was physically abused by mom, got adopted by this other person, thought, finally I have someone who's going to take care of me, keep me safe, right? These are basic human needs. And as soon as that kid turned 15 and his trauma started coming up in other ways and he started reacting to his trauma in different ways, adoptive parent says, I don't want you anymore. So now he's abandoned again. And now he's in this system where nobody wants him. And they're not afraid to let him know that he's not wanted. So instead of looking at this kid, oh, he's so angry, let's look at this kid as a kid who's experienced multiple losses and has no idea how to deal with it and is ready to push people away before they push him away, because that's what he's known to happen in his head. This person is going to push me away. This person is going to treat me bad. So before they can do that to me, I don't want you. And somebody on the call, I don't know if it was the social worker or one of the providers, was like, I hadn't thought of it that way. Right. So now that we have a different perspective, that can impact how you work with this kid. So I find those moments that way in my current position. And just my boss, she's so awesome. She's so sweet. She's very, she doesn't micromanage me at all. She's very effusive with praise. She's not afraid to say, you did a good job. She doesn't think it takes something away from her. And I'm the kind of person that I like that. I don't want to say I need it, but it helps me to feel like I'm doing a good job and to continue to want to do a good job. So we all need to feel valued. Adults, children, employees, bosses, we all need to feel valued. And I think the other part of it is just, I feel like, since my mom's not with us anymore, I just feel like she's with me in my work. There were times when I was in session with a kid and words came out of my mouth and I couldn't tell you where those words came from, and it was like they were coming from my mom to help me help this child, So I just want to continue her legacy.
I mean. That's like intergenerational transformation.
Yeah, I guess so.
That legacy.
Yeah.
And you definitely, it's right in the bio, you spelled it out. Uncles, aunts.
Right.
That your family passes on the legacy of changing people's lives. It's powerful.
Thank you.
On that note of change, what's your belief in people's ability to change?
I had this magnet that I've kept in my office. Now I don't have an office because I work from home 3 days a week. But it said HOPE, right, as an acronym, and it says something just like hope is knowing that there's always a chance for change. I can't even remember the acronym, but that's what keeps me going. There's always an opportunity for change. I think every person has that capacity. I mean, I can count on one hand in 14 years the kids who I thought, there's no going back for this kid. They're just going to be a career criminal because of X, Y, Z, and blah, blah, blah. One hand. And it's probably not even fair for me to have said that about those kids. I think about how much I've changed in my life, right? How much I changed after my mother died. How much I changed after I took on caring for my brother. And if I can do that, why can't someone else? I just feel like we all have that capacity. We all have that ability. And I think that's also part of social work values, that belief in the intrinsic value of the person. Every person. It's really that simple and that complex.
I'm going to limit myself to 3 questions.
Okay.
Because we'll be here all night. Okay, here's the last 3.
Okay.
First one. We're talking about change. We're also talking about potentially young people, who might have committed acts of violence or, hurt people, who have changed, who have experienced transformation. How do we, as a society, receive somebody back? Or how do we, as a society, move into that, especially with we're in a place of, calling people out. And so, how do we as a society move into that? Or can we, should we, do we?
Move into...
If somebody did commit violence when they were younger or at some point, but through the different processes we're talking about. Experience transformation, has changed, went through reconciliation. How can we as a society evolve into a way where we can receive them back into our community?
I think we have to dig more into restorative justice, and I think we also, in restorative justice, there's this aspect that the victim has rights, and the person who's committed the crime has rights. And so that's something I learned around probation, that balancing act, right? Yes, okay, so you're a sex offender. You say you've changed. That's great. We're going to take you on your word. But we also have a responsibility to this victim and the potential victims out there to keep them safe. So I don't think it looks like you're a sex offender. Sure, you can move in next to a school. I don't think that's what it looks like. I think it looks like, providing more opportunities for work, building relationships with communities and with companies so that people are giving people a chance. I think, work is one of those things as an adult, I don't really know an adult who feels like they don't have to be engaged in some kind of work. It's part of what makes us feel good about ourselves, right? Especially depending on how you're brought up, maybe more so than others. But having that opportunity to do something, I think is key. And I don't think there's enough resources set up for that. But I have a friend who's a probation officer, and she works with people who are coming out of jail. And she helps them get those opportunities. And, she sees that capacity for change in every one of her clients. From sex offenders, people who have drug offenses, people who have committed domestic violence. She sees that capacity for change. And I think we just have to be able to give people the space to, do what they say they're going to do. And the resources to be able to get there. But it's difficult. I mean, even me, I have my own biases, especially when it comes to like sexual abuse. That's something that just really raises my hackles with kids. But I've had to learn how to dial that back. If I'm dealing with a kid who's commercially sexually exploited and she thinks of her pimp as her boyfriend and the person who makes sure that she eats, never mind that he beat her and threw her in the closet for a couple days, she's not looking at that aspect of it. It's not serving her as her therapist if I'm like, I want to put your pimp under the jail. Yes, that's how I feel, but she's not ready to receive that yet. So that is something I have to learn. I had to learn as well. Do we get to a point where that kid recognizes the damage that was done and who it was done by? Yes, but it doesn't start with, I'm putting your pimp under the jail, and that was really difficult. But that kid wouldn't have been able to get the treatment that she needed to grow if I had that perspective. And I was just shoving that down her throat, And now she's like 22. It's amazing. They just keep growing up. I'm like, can I push a button to make you stop growing up? But they just keep growing up. Yeah.
So this is my year of grace.
Tell me what that means.
So I always have my year of something. Last year was my year of courage. And it's an intention for me to explore this in my life, to invite more of it into my life, but to also expand upon the word. And so I do that through not only my own research, but by asking my guests what grace looks like for them.
Oh, okay, so you don't want to answer my question.
I mean, I can do it.
What does it look like for you?
Grace so far for me is this moment of letting go. It's an element of that magic. Some people call it God. Some people call it manifestation. Some people call it alignment. But I think it's that moment when I stop, instead of trying to, because I'm a big will person. So if I have a task, I will complete that task. I'll push through any challenge. Mm-hmm. And grace is that moment where I let go for a minute.
Of the control.
Let go of the control of I will discipline or willpower or work my way through it, instead just I let go, and it's that magical thought that comes to your mind, or that phone call, or that person, or that thing that just aligns perfectly. I think that's grace.
Okay. For me, grace always evokes kindness. And so perhaps it's looking at, how can I be kinder to others? How can I be kinder to myself? Right? Because if you can't practice kindness with yourself, it's going to be really hard to practice it with other people. That's how I see it. And grace always makes me think of my mom. There was just something about her, in the way she was with people, that put others at ease. I don't want to cry. So it makes me think of my mom, and she really is just my biggest role model. Who I aspire to be like. So I like that. I like the idea of, how can I be more kind? And I think, when you send kindness to others, that's usually what you get back. So it's this whole reciprocal relationship. I think it's really important. Living in this topsy-turvy world that we're in.
Well, people like you help make that topsy-turvy world make a little more sense.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you and all
kind.
Other social workers and people out there doing the good work. So I appreciate that. And for you taking that leap of faith, to interview with me, and to, really share not only your own story, your own heart, but also a lot of resources and perspective, I think, on, what people like you are doing every day. So I really appreciate that.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. If people want to let you know also they appreciate you, do you mind if they reach out to you through any form of social media?
I'm on Facebook. So maybe a message on Facebook.
Okay.
My profile is, it doesn't have all those, you can find me with just my name. But I don't accept friend requests generally from people I don't know, especially since I have so many clients floating around out there.
Okay.
And part of my boundaries with clients are I don't accept friend requests from clients. And so sometimes, people can use fake names or whatever. And so I'm just kind of always aware of that.
Okay, so we'll link your social media, we'll link your Facebook in the show notes. And folks can try to message you.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I can be an intermediary, so you can go through the contact page on my website, or y'all know how to message me, how to get a hold of me, and I can connect and see if it's somebody you want to, or I'll say, check that part of your messenger folder from non-friends.
The filtered messenger.
Yes.
Yeah, where I get the marriage proposals from other continents.
Oh my goodness.
That part of Facebook. Yeah. But I'm always open to mentoring other social workers, other fitness instructors. I've brought 5 fitness instructors into the company in the last 5.5 years. I've supervised several interns. I'm mentoring social. I'm always open to that type of relationship for sure.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Show notes, tomrell.com/Sumiyah, tomrell.com/SUMIYAH. Otherwise, go to tomrell.com/blog. It'll be the most recent one. But if you're listening to this a year from now, make sure you use the show notes I linked that I just messaged. All of that stuff will be there. Want to thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is amazing.
Appreciate you having me.
Definitely. So our tradition, our routine, our ritual to end is to offer...
Ooh, I like rituals.
Yes. This is our ritual.
Yes.
What would you like to invite people to consider, to think about, to do, to be? What is your invitation?
think I would like to invite people to practice self-care. And I had said that somewhere on Facebook, and some man started mansplaining and said self-care is a made-up concept. And I'm like, no, boo-boo. Self-care is what's kept me a social worker for 14 years. And again, in learning how to take better care of ourselves, we're in a better position to help others. Whether it's inviting them to also take good care of themselves, or just being more present and more available or more open to the others that we interact with. So, yeah, that sounds good.
Sounds wonderful. Self-care is not fake news.
It's not. It's a real thing.
Hopefully we can have you back another time. We didn't get to talk about your group fitness stuff at all.
No, we didn't.
And I thought that's all we were going to talk about.
You were wrong.
And then I saw your bio. I was like, never mind. So hopefully we can have you back. We'll talk about that.
Okay.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it so much.
John.
Yes, indeed. And as always, to those listening/watching, we are wishing you peace and blessings. Thank you. One more thing. I'd love to continue the conversation. Feel free to join me at tomearl.com/join. Subscribe below, or let's connect on social media. Tom Earl Artist. Thanks again for watching.